launches, puts up a three. Won't go. Rebound Bosh. Back out to Allen. His three-pointer. Bang! Tie game with 5 seconds remaining.
Hello, and welcome to the Running Hook Podcast, hosted by Alex Burr, a member of the Running Hook Podcast Network. Hello, and welcome back to another edition of the Running Hook Podcast. This week I am joined by first-time guest on the Running Hook, although our friend Caleb Lynn stole him before I could have him, Will Hogsett. Will, how you doing today, man?
I'm great, Alex. Thanks for having me on the pod. You're right, Caleb stole me yesterday to do the Pacific Division on Linsanity. You know, it seems I only get recruited to do these kind of things when LeBron's being talked about. What's the deal with that, AB, huh?
Well, the podcast is literally being released while we're talking. So this is going to come out on Thursday. But I do have to say, you provided some nuanced opinions that I wasn't expecting from you yesterday. So, you know, you did a really good job on the Clippers. You know, I expected the bias to come out, but the bias, you did a good job of keeping your journalism hat on. So I appreciated that.
Thanks, AB. I'll try to do my best again today. But you know, this is a big moment. This is a big moment in my LeBron stan. You know, I think it kind of culminated almost. Kind of put it in for the rest of my life. All right, I'll be a big LeBron guy. So, yeah, I remember game 6, 2013 against the Spurs like it was yesterday. So I'm excited to get going.
And so, like Will said, we're going to talk about Game 6 of the 2013 Finals between the Spurs and the Heat. Now, I realize I've done like about 6 of these game rewatches, and I haven't really done a good job of providing context of why the game was important. So, but this one, I think you need the context to understand why the game was important. So, LeBron was down 3-2, or the Heat were down 3-2 coming into this game. It was in Miami, so they had home court. But, I mean, we'll talk about this later because you can't talk about this game without talking about this. Their home court advantage kind of eviscerated once after the Spurs were up 95-92.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think what's interesting about this series specifically is the 2-3-2 format that was used in the past, and I think that kind of played the role that kind of helped the Heat go over the top. You know, as you'll see, we'll go into depth about Game 6 specifically, but you know, a big factor in the series was that they had Game 7 back in Miami, and you know, if that's different, you kind of wonder what could have happened, you know.
And I think one of the reasons that this game is so fascinating is because we saw, like, I think this was the last game where if LeBron lost this game, you could say he wasn't clutch, right? Like, yeah. I think that would have been probably I think you agree that probably would have been a fair assessment.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not like he didn't come up big, right? In the fourth quarter, so the first 3 quarters of the game, LeBron shot, I believe the graphic on the screen said it was 3 for 12. Mm-hmm. And then in the fourth quarter, he goes out and shoots 7 for 11. Mm-hmm. But 2 of those misses were key 3-point misses.
Yes.
And I mean, we're going to talk about this later, but one of them was I think a coaching blunder by Greg Popovich. Just not having Tim Duncan in the game leading to the most important shot of the game. But LeBron, you know, this game kind of showed spacing was key for LeBron's game. And I guess we could just talk about the fourth quarter now, because we're going to probably talk about this game a little out of order, because we're probably going to jump from this to Tim Duncan. But so what did you notice watching the game the difference was from the first 3 quarters to the fourth quarter?
Well, I think it's important to kind of look at the earlier games in the series to kind of understand what the mindset of LeBron was. In Game 1, he had his, LeBron stats that are pretty good. And in the fourth quarter and the second half, really, he kind of went to the playmaking LeBron, letting the role players, trying to make plays for other people in game one. And they lost game one. Tony Parker hit that ridiculous turnaround off the backboard roll in, and I think that was one of the moments where LeBron's like, okay, if I'm gonna beat these guys, I gotta beat them. And I think you mentioned that he missed a couple shots, and that's in the end, and that's the crazy part, because that's what people only remember. People only remember the couple threes that he missed, and then of course the one that fell to Bosh that got back to Ray Allen. But I think in this quarter, specifically in Game 6, this quarter in Game 6, I think he decided, he's like, okay, you know what? If I don't do this, we're gonna lose. And I think that mindset has kind of, in that game, propelled him through the rest of his career, because he's like, okay, maybe I can do this. And whether the shot, it happened how it happened. And I think the stats, when you look at them objectively, it's just like, okay, LeBron, it depends on your definition of clutch. Is your definition of clutch fourth quarter, just doing the whole thing the whole time, or is your definition of clutch the last minute? And that's where you could argue. I mean, I think there's no doubt that LeBron struggles per se. Maybe he's more open to passing in the last minute, but I think that's just the player that he is. And I think in Game 6 against the Spurs, at least, he realized that, maybe I can't do that. Maybe I have to win it.
And I'm not interested in litigating the Jordan-Michael conversation, because, frankly, I've already done that at least 3 times on this podcast. And I know where you stand, and you know where I stand. But there's one key difference, right, between LeBron and Jordan. It's that LeBron is not Michael Jordan. No one's Michael Jordan. That's the point. Michael Jordan was a singular guy, and even Michael Jordan passed it off. People don't care, because the times he passed it off, the guys made it, right? You always hear about Paxson and Kerr, but those guys made the shots. Why do you think that, LeBron always gets criticized for passing it off? It's because if you're double teamed, it's a lot harder to get a shot off, and a guy LeBron's size, they have to double team him. But I think an interesting thing from this game, right, just watching, I think one thing you and I probably both noticed is how much they played off of LeBron, right? The Spurs were just making it a point. We're just like, we're going to let you drive into our bodies, because you're afraid to shoot that mid-range shot. And just watching him now in the 2020 context, there's no way he's afraid to take those shots. He's taking a wide open mid-range if you give it to him. But I think, so hear me out. Tell me if you agree or disagree. I think LeBron was a way better athlete in 2013. And I think he was still a great basketball player. I think he's a better basketball player now than he was then.
I definitely agree, and I was thinking, because I knew this was going to come up. I was trying to think, the athleticism, just the pureness is unmatched of LeBron in 2013. I think where in 2013 he is more prone to turnover due to the athleticism. He's more out of pocket, just going everywhere. But not saying he doesn't turn the ball over now, but I think whenever he turns the ball over, you at least see more of a direction and where he was going. I think it was in 2013. It was kind of, he was just raw, trying to do what he could do. Whereas as he's watched the game develop even more through the last couple of years, he's kind of slowed his pace down a bit, which in the end is going to just further extend his career. And so I don't know. I think the best player, probably basketball player, is maybe yet to be seen, or the last couple of years of LeBron. But I mean, if you're talking about fear, instilling fear into the other opponents, if LeBron's on in 2013 and he's not missing, I think that's his peak, probably. But I think the basketball IQ of the last couple of years has kind of helped extend him a bit further.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, we mentioned the 3-pointers, right? Now, we do have to couch. He did make one, right? He took 3 3-pointers in the final minute. He missed 2 horribly, but he did make the second one. So it's not like he, was completely dope. But there was, I think we could both agree it was not a good turnover where he just drives into the lane. I think he's being guarded by Tony Parker, and he just kind of throws the ball to Tim Duncan. I don't know what happened. It didn't look like Tony Parker got his hand on the ball, but you're definitely right, because he definitely wouldn't make that same mistake now. He wouldn't, just give the ball up to Tim Duncan. Hell, he's done it against better teams than this. He's put up better performances against. That's not fair because, the 2013 Spurs probably would have been the best team he played if under normal NBA circumstances.
Yeah.
But, just the Spurs defense in this game, I think we can both agree was just on point, even with LeBron dominating that fourth quarter.
Yeah, and I think that played a factor too. Once the Spurs realized that Kawhi alone may be kind of enough to at least stunt LeBron, I think that kind of opened game plans everywhere. I think going into the series, they're thinking, okay, we're at least going to have to just keep an arm on him beyond a guard. But then I think Kawhi kind of showed that maybe he could maybe lock down in certain circumstances, and I think that added to the game plan, especially in the later games. But going on what you said about the turnover to Duncan, that and similar to like the last 3-pointer that he took. That last 3-pointer wasn't necessarily a great shot. He kind of rushed it to an extent. And, if I'm just thinking in 2020, the LeBron now, he's not taking that shot. He's gonna do a dribble move, a step back, one of his things to get open. And I think that kind of shows how LeBron has grown. I think he was caught up in that moment for the last 3-pointer. He's like, oh shit, we're down 3. I got to score, right? And so he kind of rushed it. And so now I think the game, as I mentioned, is slowed down to him. And I think that he probably wouldn't have taken that exact shot, maybe even leaned to pass it off. I think that it happened how it happened, and I'm grateful that it happened. Ray Allen was there to hit the step back. Incredible. Didn't even know where he was stepping, it looked like. I don't know how he hit it, and, the rest is history. But I just think that LeBron in that moment, like you mentioned, was a little bit caught up, caught up in the game, and it wasn't able to step back.
And he definitely, I think he forced it, right? Like he tried, like LeBron doesn't force it often. That was definitely a case of him being like playing hero ball.
Yeah.
I just because how many times can we say LeBron's done that in his career? You can't think of too many. And then the one time he does do it, he gets bailed out. I think it's by Popovich personally, but that just is it was a really dumb decision. Because even if Tim Duncan wasn't giving you the solid offense that he was giving you in the first half, right? He really fell off from the first half to the second half. And we'll talk about Duncan in a second. You can't not have your best rebounder on the floor who is to guard Bosh. I know he's not as mobile, but Tim Duncan's one of the smartest players that we've ever had in the NBA.
Yeah.
This is undoubtedly true. He would stick with Bosh, right? And then he would follow Bosh back down to the paint and box him out.
It's interesting to look at because Duncan, if he had been there in that moment, it was all so rushed that I don't think the defense, the Spurs defense, had a chance to kind of react because, like you said, I think LeBron did force it up, and I think had you had Duncan down on the low block, Bosh wouldn't have gotten, a essentially open rebound. And then you had one of the greatest at the time before Steph Curry kind of showed off, the greatest 3-point shooter of all time, backing down to the corner. And I don't think anyone thought after they saw Ray Allen get that ball, I don't think anyone thought it was going to miss, And I think you're right. I think had they had Duncan in that position, the series might not even gone to 7 games or had the ability to. So,
and first off, I just want to say that's an all-time call. That's Mike Breen's best call. It's rebound Bosh, back out to Allen, his 3-pointer, bang!
Yes, absolutely.
That's his probably best call. And Mike Breen's one of the best announcers of all time. And I don't know I'm assuming you were watching this live.
Well, I actually have a funny story about that. Are you ready?
Yeah.
So I was watching the game, and so this is me in middle school, super invested to LeBron, and I think they were starting to lose pretty bad and or starting to go downhill, and I think I just shut it off. And for some reason, I was like, I had given up on LeBron, and maybe, and like you said earlier, maybe for good, because this circumstance, if Ray Allen doesn't make that shot, LeBron's lost 2 titles now with the Heat, only won 1 coming. What happens, and going into the next year, obviously we know now that they lose, but I think when people say, Ray Allen saved LeBron's legacy, I hate saying that there's some truth to that, because, LeBron did the recruiting, got Ray Allen on the team, put him in the position to be there, and, the plays happen as they do. But I think the reason why everyone says that is because of the almost balance that would have just fallen apart had Ray Allen missed that shot. Like the legacy, I won't say destroyed, but it's definitely, there's definitely a chunk in it if he misses that shot. And so again, that just goes to adding all that pressure on LeBron in the moment to kind of force it up.
Definitely. And so let me give you some context, right? Because you've known me for about a year now, give or take. And I'm pretty objective, right? I'm pretty objective in my analysis. Let me tell you something. In 2013, I was not objective, okay? I wanted the Heat to lose. And then when I watched that shot go in, okay? And I was just like, my jaw was literally on the floor for 2 reasons. I'm like, oh my God, LeBron's going to win another one. Mm-hmm. And then B, this is the greatest basketball shot I've ever seen.
Yeah.
Like, undoubtedly. Like, Bill Simmons tries to contextualize it, and like I feel like he does a pretty good job of that. But what he says is that, think about it this way, okay? He's on the block. Ray Allen's like on the block or pretty close to it. And so he's doing a dead backward sprint and then stopping on a dime to pull up from 3. I mean, just think about how difficult that is. Like, you couldn't do it, right? Like, most people couldn't do that because the corner is real small, the NBA corner. You have about, like, most NBA players' feet can fit inside of there, but that's about the extent to which they can do it. So think about how many times he had, like, Ray Allen is known. Like, he's known to be a control freak. Like, he knows, like, he works out, he practices every shot meticulously. Think about the court awareness to just know, okay, I'm at this spot on the floor. This is where I need to stop while I'm running backwards. Yeah. Like, is anyone fast running backwards?
Yeah.
Nobody is.
It's incredible because it's like it was just like robotic Ray Allen, Chris Bosh. Like, as soon as he saw the ball come off the rim, you just see him just backing up, just backpedaling, gets the ball. Somehow, right when he gets the ball, he's in the perfect spot and instantly pulls up, no hesitation. And I think from that point, I think he was pretty. I mean, he had a hand in his face, but not too much. And I think he knew when he pulls up, especially from that corner. I think you just knew that, damn, what a game,
And like you said, recruiting one of the greatest three-point shooters to be a role player on your team, like Ray Allen. So this was Ray Allen's first year on the team. Okay, he was a all-star not too long before this season. He was old, I will grant that. He was drafted in '96. He was 37 during the 2012-13 season. He took 2 years before, he was averaging 16.5 points a game. Like, think about the level of buy-in that takes, right? Like, when you're an all-star for your whole career, right? Ray Allen made, just off a quick count, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. He made 10 all-star teams, right? If you're a 10-time all-star and somebody asks you to come off the bench and be an ace three-point shooter, most people are just like, I'm good. But the level of buy-in, right, that takes. Ray Allen made 2 of the most important plays in this game. He got fouled in overtime too. Nobody remembers that because to be honest, after that shot, I didn't remember any of overtime, but I think that there was a collective feeling around like anyone who was watching that game live, like, oh, this is over.
Yeah.
This is over. The Heat won.
I hate to compare it to another LeBron moment, but it's really like in game one of, let's see, the 2017 or 2018 finals when it was him by himself against the Warriors and KD. You know he's going to Golden State. He didn't have a chance really to win, but game one, they're ahead. They're looking good. And it comes down to the last second, the J.R. Smith blunder goes into overtime, and just similar to this situation, it's like, okay, maybe even further, it's like, okay, the Warriors just won the series, and I think it could be similar to the 2013 finals. Like, I mean, no one you can't give game 7 up, right? But that shot, man, with so much momentum. It's like it gave the Heat exactly what they needed. Like, okay, we could do this, and they went out in game 7 and did it. And I think what's really, really interesting about this game, going along what you said about them not having Tim Duncan in the lineup at the end. By the way, he was plus 16 on the game. If you look at the plus minus for the Heat, you look at Bosh, D Wade, and LeBron, and combined together, they're like minus 20, minus 19 on the night, and you got to wonder, it's like, how does that happen? Dwayne Wade is minus 15, Chris Bosh is minus 3 plus minus, and LeBron James on the night is minus 1. How do they win? And I guess like we mentioned, it's just that shot just, I think, kind of helped propel them not only for the rest of the game, but the last game in the series as well.
I think now's a good time to talk about Chris Bosh, though, because even though his plus minus was minus 3, he had, probably the 2 most important plays of the game, because he had, obviously that rebound and assist to Ray Allen, right? Like, that happens because of Chris Bosh. That doesn't, Ray Allen, is, literally the most perfect recipient in the history of NBA to get that pass. Yeah. But if Chris Bosh doesn't make that play, that doesn't happen. And then the other play to which I'm referring to is, so the Spurs are down 3 at the end of overtime. Okay, they drop a really good play to get Danny Green open. Yeah. Except Chris Bosh switches and just blocks it, right? Like, absolutely. He stuffs. Like, when you're coming up with the word stuff in the dictionary, like in terms of basketball blocks, that was stuff.
That and the game 1 block game 2 against Splitter for LeBron. Those and two, I'm sorry to cut you off, but for as momentum bringing Ray Allen's 3-point shot was, almost equally on the other end, that block from Chris Bosh in the corner to just seal the game, almost just like a momentum destroyer for the Spurs, because it really was a stuff, man. He's flying out to the corner, and he gets a shot up, and it's just nothing, and the game's over. And it's like, wow, right?
And I don't think people realize how hard it is to block a 3-pointer, right? Like, even if you are Chris Bosh, these guys get shots off so fast. Like, Danny Green set the record for 3-pointers made in a series in this series. Like, he's obviously a great shooter, right? We've seen it over the rest of the course of his career. It's hard to block 3-pointers. Like, nobody does it. And so the fact that not only that he stuffed it, just like he played really bad, right? Like, Bosh was not good in this game. He was good on defense, but he wasn't good on offense. Mm-hmm. But those 2 plays more than made up for everything else that he did wrong, right? Like, yeah. And that's why Chris Bosh, to me, like, you want to talk about sacrifice. My goodness, I don't even think he scored in the next game, but he still put up. Here, I'm going to pull up the game 7 box score, because I did not look at that yet, but I'm pretty sure that Chris Bosh went scoreless in that game, still had a positive impact. So let's see. Yes, Chris Bosh, game 7, 0 points, 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a block. But it's like he was plus 1, Like, that kind of impact is just like, you can't overstate it, right? And it, to me, was like, I think the other main storyline from this game, it has to be Duncan. Duncan just was incredible in the first 3 quarters. he had all of his points through the third quarter, and then he just, I don't know, the Heat's defense got better somehow, even though Birdman Anderson couldn't guard him.
Mm-hmm.
But Duncan in the first half, what was it like watching that again?
Well, I think I guess I didn't realize how necessarily consistent Duncan was. I think a lot in the media you hear about Duncan and being a great, but I don't think the media gives him kind of his due diligence per se, because I think he's just a down low, but can also, hit the mid range, and it showed in this game. I think he was what was his field goal percentage? 62%. He did fall off, but the 17 rebounds, that just further pushes your point. Like, the guy had 17 rebounds. Why is he not in? Why is he not in? And I think you're right. That is a big factor. Probably one of Pop's biggest regrets. Like, guy had 17 rebounds. All he had to do was get another one, and you got another finals appearance. But it's weird, because it's almost as if kind of LeBron took the power in the fourth in the end, and he's kind of like Space Jam. He grabbed the ball and took the power from him, and we saw what happened. But I think the thing about Tim Duncan is his consistency, and I think he wears you down just being him. It's weird, because he's not the flashy guy. It's similar to Kawhi Leonard in an extent. He's just good at the game of basketball, and that's what you're getting from him. And I think coming from the Miami side, that's just tiring. Just be like, God, this guy, we can't stop him, and he's just continue. And I think they got lucky in the fourth, but I don't know. I think Duncan could have made a little bit of a bigger impact, like you mentioned.
And so Tim Duncan's first half stats are like good for a finals game if they were the whole game, right? I mean, he shot 11 for 13. He had 25 points, 8 rebounds. Like, if a player puts that up in a finals game 6, you're like, wow, what an effort, right? Like, he did that in the first half. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then obviously he fell off. In the fourth quarter, he went 0 for 4. He had 2 rebounds. Right? Like, he wasn't great in the fourth quarter, but he was still a positive, right? Like, when he was on the floor, it was +1. Mm-hmm. Every other Spur was negative differential for that quarter. Mm-hmm. Okay? Like, obviously Parker hit a couple clutch shots at the end of the game where, he brought the team back closer in it. But then it was like the rest of the Spurs, they just kind of had a meltdown. Obviously, Duncan didn't score. Kawhi missed a free throw. Manu missed a free throw. And, like, those little things, like, make up the edge, right? Like, you miss a free throw, and it doesn't matter, like, what else he did right. Because mm-hmm. the Spurs for the game, they didn't shoot poorly from the foul line. They only missed 7 foul shots the whole game. But when 2 of those come at the end of the game, right? I mean, that just that's backbreaking.
Yeah, and I think coming from the Spurs especially, it's really unorthodox from them, And we've already mentioned how great of a coach Pop is, but I hate to say they collapsed, but it's like they kind of they saw they got the ring too quickly almost. I feel like they felt like they probably had it, and with LeBron James on the other side, I don't think you could ever do that. And I think something that we don't talk about, what happened to Dwayne Wade? Like, I love Dwayne Wade. I love him. I really do. I think he's a great player, but I think his tenure with the Heat is kind of exaggerated to an extent. I think, and I hate to put it all on LeBron, but I think LeBron did a lot, especially in the playoffs, especially in this series. And I mean, we obviously saw the next year some injuries and see him decline a bit, but I think even before the injuries started to happen, I think you really saw LeBron win the game for him. And, Dwayne Wade had his moment in against the Mavericks in 2006 where he kind of did that thing. And I don't know. I watched him, and he seems to force it. He seemed to get caught in the moment. It feels like, something that I always go back to with the Heat especially is I feel like they put so much pressure on themselves with the not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, because everyone believed them. I mean, everyone believed them because when they said that, we're like, they might win like 4 or 5. And you see, and I think that had an effect not only on LeBron, but Dwayne Wade as well, where they kind of put all this pressure on themselves and it took the focus off basketball in a sense.
Yeah, so I actually pulled up while you were talking because I was curious. Have you looked at like his stats before LeBron got there? His stats are insanity.
Well, he was a scoring champ, wasn't he?
So he led the league in scoring in 08-09. He scored 30 points a game. From his second season till the season before LeBron got there, he averaged 27 points a game, 7 assists, 5 boards, 2 steals, and a block. Mm-hmm. For 5 years. That's insanity. Like,
any all-star.
There's a legitimate case that he's the 3rd best shooting guard of all time. I'm not going to make that case, but there's a legitimate case that he's one of the best. And I think there's one thing that you didn't say that I think is the real reason why they put pressure on themselves is because as hesitant as LeBron was to shoot the outside shot, D Wade was even more hesitant. Yeah. Like they both. I looked at the reason why I had Dwayne Wade's basketball reference page pulled up is I wanted to see how many 3-pointers he took from because he took a lot in 2010-11. So from 2011-12 to 13-14, he took 154 3-pointers in LeBron's last 3 years in Miami in the regular season. I mean, could you imagine a starting shooting guard in the league not taking – he only took 32. I mean, he played – okay. In 12-13, he played 69 games, which was the most he played out of the Miami span that was in 10-11. And he took 66. Could you imagine a 2-guard playing 69 games and not even taking a 3-pointer a game?
Yeah, that's not happening in today's NBA.
And so it was clear that the Spurs they respected LeBron's shot very little, and they respected Wade's shot even less, right? Like, obviously they didn't respect LeBron's shot because they kept throwing Boris Diaw on him. God love him. But isn't it like, I just want to talk about that for a second. Isn't it funny, like, that LeBron was able to be guarded by Boris Diaw capably in the finals?
Yeah, and that just shows his growth, I think. Like, obviously, in the current state, he's not going to be able to be guarded by a Boris Diaw. I think he could score on guards a bit better. But going back to, why Ray Allen was there in the first place, I think you just brought it up. They realized they could not. They struggled shooting the ball. I think Mike Miller, I like Mike Miller. Mike Miller got hot in the playoffs. Mario Chalmers is either really hot or really, really cold. Shane Battier, I think he was pretty consistent, but I think Ray Allen kind of put them over the charts for the 3-point. At least, they got the title, and I think he added that dynamic that they needed. Now, if Dwayne Wade was able in the time to, maybe adjust and become more of a spot-up shooter and, be more of a catch-and-shoot kind of guy off LeBron, then I think you could have seen extended success and maybe further along the line, maybe not see LeBron go back to Cleveland so soon. But I think, LeBron James and Dwayne Wade were both great in their retrospect by themselves, but they didn't fit like LeBron and Anthony Davis, for example. Mm-hmm. They were both kind of drive first guys, and that doesn't work. That didn't really work for them because the Spurs could just kind of clog it up, especially when they had Duncan and they could throw Diaw on them. So it was just they were great players, but the fit wasn't perfect.
And you saw it in the fourth quarter, right? Because Wade didn't play. Wade only played, I think, 4 minutes in the fourth quarter. So in the first half of the fourth quarter, that's when LeBron really went off. And you notice who's on the floor. It's Mike Miller, which, by the way, just a quick aside, I didn't remember that this was the game where Mike Miller hit the 3 with the shoe off.
With the shoe off? That was a legend. That was a legendary moment.
I thought that was in a different game. But then it was Mario Chalmers, Ray Allen, and it was Birdman. And you notice that's really like one of the modern lineups you see in the NBA, because you're playing with a guy who can score a lot, right? Like, it's kind of like how the Mavericks are built this year, if you think about it.
Mm-hmm.
You have Luka, then Tim Hardaway Jr. Obviously, Tim Hardaway Jr. can do a little more off the dribble than the rest of those guys. Mm-hmm. But, you have like your Dorian Finney-Smith. Then you have Dwight Powell, right? Mm-hmm. Like your guy who can just dive to the rim and is a benefactor of all that space. And so, like, that lineup to me kind of like, even though I think Birdman was really overrated when he was in Miami, right? Like, I mean, the guy that Duncan was torching for most of the first half was Birdman. Mm-hmm. But, like, that lineup with, like, the rim running guy, I mean, it kind of looked like a modern lineup. And that to me was like, LeBron was getting the easiest shots he got all game. There wasn't really any help defense to be played, because you can't leave Birdman at the rim if LeBron's by the rim. You can't leave Miller. You could leave Chalmers, but Chalmers was hot in this game. Chalmers put up a great performance in this game. He had 20 points, 7 of 11 shooting. Mm-hmm. He had one of the best plus minuses on the Heat along with Miller. Mm-hmm. When they gave LeBron the space, he took it, right? Like, there was one play in particular that stands out. He was driving in transition, and Duncan picked him up, right? And, you obviously think, okay, LeBron's barreling towards the rim, Tim Duncan's guarding it. It's going to be a wash, right? Like, most of the time, even at Tim Duncan's advanced age at that point. But LeBron stopped. He jump stopped, did a, pump fake. No one came to help Duncan, and he just did a step through for, an easy layup. Like, it was real easy. And that was, most of the fourth quarter. And then you notice, we talk about his end of the game struggles. Do you notice who was in at that point? Dwayne Wade.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, D-Wade, don't get me wrong, he hit, he made 2 free throws, with 2 minutes left. But other than that, he was gone almost in the rest of the game. And I think what's interesting, especially when you mentioned the spacing, the spacing that they had back then compared to today, when LeBron hit his 3-pointer with 30 seconds left or so, or 20 seconds left, Mike Miller was in the game for Chris Bosh. They had that lineup, and Miller, got the rebound luckily, but they had that kind of small lineup. And then it's almost perfect. They subbed Chris Bosh in for Mike Miller in the last half, and Bosh got the rebound. So it's like a perfect example of what you're giving up when you go for those small ball lineups. And for the Heat, it worked perfectly for them.
Yeah, and so I'm going to kind of awkwardly transition off of that, because we can't watch this game and not talk about how bad Tony Parker and Manu were. They were really bad. Manu in particular. If you hadn't watched a game of basketball before and were told that Manu Ginobili was a Hall of Famer, you'd watch this game and go, what the hell are you talking about?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I think a lot of that has to do with a part of them thinking they had it in the bag per se, and I think they didn't realize necessarily the what it'd be going back to Miami, and then like you said, Tim Duncan has a all-star half, and they're like, okay, it's like they never got started. Because they just let Tim Duncan get going. And obviously, as we saw, as the game came back to even, they were needed. Now, Ginobili, he didn't do too bad. He missed 1 free throw, I think. And he made the other 2.
Just wait till I read you the stats. It's bad. So, okay, I'm not even going to read you all the stats, okay? I'm just going to read you this one. The Spurs had 13 turnovers. How many of those do you think Manu Ginobili had?
9, 8.
You're close. 8. He had, think about that. You turned the ball over 13 times, and 8 of them are one player who played 34 minutes.
Yeah.
That alone right there, plus you missed a free throw. That's just, all-time bad game. He redeemed himself in the next finals. He was probably their best player in the next finals, if I'm being honest with you. But in 2013, he was real inconsistent. And, this is one of those games where you need your inconsistent guys to hit shots. Even, Parker, Parker would probably have been the player that people thought were the best player 2013, right? The Spurs' best player. I mean, Tony Parker shot 6 for 23. I mean, he had a huge step back three, right? Threes weren't a huge part of Tony Parker's game, but he had a huge step back three in the final 2 minutes. But I mean, like, other than that, he was largely neutralized. I mean, LeBron shut him down in overtime. LeBron, this was like that's like an underrated thing that nobody talks about. They just stuck LeBron on Tony Parker in overtime in the Spurs offense. The Spurs only scored 5 points in overtime.
Yeah, I think especially when you look into overtime, obviously we mentioned that the momentum was with Miami, but it really never got too far away for the Spurs. Like, it's like they had a chance. They were down 1 for like 60 seconds and they just couldn't connect. And, you know, maybe if they were able to in the last couple minutes hit some shots, you know, maybe they were able to force the Heat to do a little bit more. But I think it is interesting. It's like almost they just kind of gave up to an extent. I mean, I know you don't really give up in a game, but, you know, especially coming from the Spurs where you think of, you know, they're going to finish everything. They're going to do what they need to do to win. And it's just so uncharacteristic of them to kind of lose in this way. And I think that's why it's such an interesting game to look at, because going into it, you're like, LeBron, man, he's struggling, especially against these Spurs that are gonna be tough to beat. And it's almost kind of like they fell over for LeBron to win. And, you know, like we've mentioned before, that has become a crucial point in the legacy of LeBron and maybe the biggest flaw in Popovich's career.
Do you want to hear a dumb theory that I have?
Yeah.
So this is just about the Spurs in general, right? Like the Spurs made one change from 2013 to 14, but I think it was a huge change that I don't think, obviously nobody talks about it because the player that I'm about to mention isn't like important in the history of the league. But that upgrade from Gary Neal to Patty Mills in 2014, I think probably swung that series, right? Because like Gary Neal is fine, but in this game he was really bad. He shot 2 for 7. He shot 1 for 3 from 3. I mean, just was kind of useless out there personally. Like, upgrading from that to Patty Mills, who was one of the most important players in the 2014 finals. And then you have like a huge impact, right? That the bench, because in the series, right, the Spurs basically played 7 guys that they could rely on, and then Thiago Splitter. Right? Like a lot of Thiago Splitter, and I mean Thiago Splitter is a fine basketball player. There's no doubt about this, but he's not like a guy you want. I mean, the one player that other than Duncan that stepped up for the Spurs was a guy you mentioned earlier, Kawhi Leonard. So what was it like watching Kawhi in this game compared to what we know now?
You know, it's really interesting because, you know, even LeBron, I don't think it was this game, but even LeBron at the time knew that Kawhi was that guy. I mean, we always see the video of LeBron shooting the free throws and turning around and damn, when Kawhi comes in, you know. But I think that's kind of a metaphor for how we all felt as NBA fans. Like, who is this guy? Is this guy just a product of the Spurs system? This great, or is this guy legit? And I think definitely in the earlier years, and this one specifically, and the next year, of course, he proved how good he was on the defensive end. And I think that's really interesting kind of player archetype to look at, because you don't see that often in today's NBA, a player starting from, you know, a really good defender and then building up to be this offensive superstar that he is now. And so you wonder, maybe had he stayed with the Pacers, you know, what would have happened there? I think I don't want to say he's a product of San Antonio, because I think that's a falsehood. I think a lot of what he's accomplished, especially going to accomplish, is going to be because of him. I mean, in Toronto, that's not a product of San Antonio. But I think it's interesting because he got into that system, and, you know, he he didn't have to be the guy, and so he could kind of focus on the defensive side, build up his repertoire that way, and then as the big three started declining, he kind of filled that offensive load for them. And so it's fun to look at Kawhi because he had almost like a perfect transition into his NBA career, in my opinion, that just allowed him to blossom and blossom and blossom and blossom and keep going. And then you see him with the Raptors now, and he's like the full guy. Like, not with the Raptors, but you saw him with the Raptors last year, and he's like, okay, he's like a culmination of everything, the offensive and the defensive that he had against LeBron. So it's really interesting, and it makes you wonder, like, where can he go from here? You know, can he continue to? I don't know how much better he could get offensively and defensively. It's like, you know, we talk about the greatest players of all time, Michael Jordan, LeBron James, but I think at the end of his career, there's going to be a case for Kawhi Leonard being the top 5, top 10 at least, you know, because he's truly become not only the defensive superstar that he was, but he can score on all levels now. And I think watching him in that and seeing him battle the LeBron in his earlier years, and the two in the finals specifically, that just gave him the confidence and motivation to just keep growing. And I think we've seen the product of that in today's NBA.
You know, actually, now that I think about it, I'd never thought of this before. You know who's another guy whose NBA career started slowly? They didn't get a whole lot of points at first, but now is considered widely consensus top 10 player of all time?
Who?
Kobe Bean Bryant.
Yeah.
And I think maybe top 10 is a little off. I don't think I agree with that necessarily, but I think he will be, at worst, I think probably top 30. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't think he's really talented, and you could kind of see it in this game. It's funny watching the old Spurs games. Like, this was only his second year in the league, right? He wasn't going to get a lot of shots in the Spurs. He only took 9 field goal attempts per game in the regular season. You know, he averaged 12 points, shot 37% from 3. You know, good player. You know, like, nobody thought he was going to be this, right? Mm-hmm. But you could kind of see it, like, in this game, right? He was really dominant on the glass. Mm-hmm. He was really, like, he was probably their second best rebounder. Mm-hmm. And then you have, you know, some of the shots he was putting in, right? Like, he had a really tough and one at one point where his body was, like, leaning like this. Like, you know, a shot that he hits with ease now. Yeah. But you're like, oh, you could kind of see, like, what he was going to become then, right? Like, he didn't have the mid-range repertoire yet. Like, that wasn't in his game. But you saw, like, he had one little floater. You know, he was getting there, right? He was only in his second year, and he put up 22 points in a finals game. You know, like, that's really tough for a second-year player. And just going back and looking at Kobe's. Let's see, I pulled up Kobe's. Kobe in his second year averaged 15.4 points per game, right? Like, he didn't average. He got to the line 5-6 times a game in his second year. How does that happen? Mm-hmm. But he was like, you know, it's kind of a similar trajectory where at the point where Kawhi is now, Kobe was averaging 27.6 points a game. And this year Kawhi's averaging 26.9. Mm-hmm. So I'm not gonna say that he's gonna go from that to averaging 35.4. Mm-hmm. Right? Kawhi's not going to average that, but he's really dominant in kind of the same way that Kobe was. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that he's like the predecessor to like Kobe playing that way, the way that they play, and getting to watch him young, right? Like, that was fun again, see people scared of him defensively, mm-hmm. like on a switch, right? Like, there was one play at the end where they tried to force the switch it was a Mario Chalmers LeBron pick and roll, right? Mm-hmm. And they wanted Tony Parker on LeBron. And as soon as Kawhi switched, Mario Chalmers is like, I'm not having this ball. Are you crazy? Yeah. He throws it right at LeBron. And like, even for a guy in his second year, that's powerful, man. Like, that's like real stuff.
Yeah, and I think since then he's been kind of on the forefront of the NBA media's minds. I think ever since then, you know, he's kind of been that guy, or at least one of the top guys in San Antonio. And I love the Kobe Bryant reference because it's interesting, because as you watch Kawhi develop, it's almost as if he's taking parts of Kobe Bryant's game and using it. Because the thing that I watched when I was watching the finals last year, the thing that truly mesmerized me about Kawhi Leonard was his ability not only to create his own shot in the mid-range, but knock down and hit difficult shots, you know? And it's like magic, especially last year, to watch in the playoffs, because he's in his Terminator mode and he's moving around, and it's like it's like he wasn't even driving. He was just driving to find a spot and then pulling up. And you haven't seen that. You don't, maybe a bit of KD, when he's healthy, the dribble pull up, but you don't see a consistent dribble pull up like that in the game today. And I think a lot of what he has become is because of watching, Kobe Bryant, and I think his 3-pointer is a little bit more consistent maybe than Kobe, but I think it's interesting. I got a question to prop up to you.
Okay.
At the end of their career, who would you rank higher? I guess it's tough to project, but who would you rank higher on the NBA list? Kawhi Leonard or Kevin Durant?
That is tough. KD, I'm probably gonna say KD just because, we saw even in last year's finals, right? Like by game 6, he needed Kyle Lowry to carry them because his leg was just done, right? Like there's something wrong with his leg. Like people are always like, oh, load management. It's like, do you want to watch this guy in the playoffs? Mm-hmm. Do you want to watch this guy dominate? Then you're going to have to live with that, right? Like it sucks not having a guy play 20 games a year. Mm-hmm. But if his leg keeps going at this pace, I don't see a way that he could play past 35. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like just realistically, like if your leg falls apart. But I mean, even if he plays because he's averaged, so his last 3 healthy years, right? Like obviously there was that year in San Antonio where he played 9 games. Mm-hmm. But the last 3 healthy years that he had, this year, last year, and 2017, he averaged 25.5 points, 26.6, and 26.9. And then in the playoffs he averaged, so last year in Toronto he averaged 30.5 points per game for the playoffs. Jesus Christ. 27.7. And then 2016, the first year where he was like kind of in that star, but he was still having to play with Duncan and Aldridge, that was 22.5. So like I think his playoff heroics, I actually think it kind of boils down to a simple question too. If he wins one with the Clippers, then there's a chance. But also, KD's one of the best players that we've ever watched. Him joining the Warriors notwithstanding. Mm-hmm. Like, you could watch Durant play and just be, like, utterly mesmerized. It's tough. It's a good question. I think because KD has, even without the injuries, KD has, like, 4 years on Kawhi. Mm-hmm. Like, I think actually 6 seasons on Kawhi. I think KD's played 13 years, even without playing this year. Let's see. Okay, yeah, he's played 12 seasons, and Kawhi's played 7. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I'd probably go with KD just because, like, KD's averaging 27 points a game for his career. Mm-hmm. But it's a good question, right? You have a guy that will have won 3 Finals MVPs. Or was he Finals MVP in 2014? I don't remember.
Yes, he was. I think he won that. He won it for guarding LeBron, essentially.
I mean, that was 2 in a row that won for guarding LeBron between him and Iguodala. Mm-hmm. Iguodala that's a rant for another time. Should not have been the Finals MVP in 2015. It was either LeBron or Steph. Come on now. Mm-hmm. And like people are gonna use that now because they'll be like, oh, LeBron never won or Steph never won Finals MVP. It's like, come on now, it's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. In the words of our friend Caleb Lynn, what a load of crap.
Yeah, I think and the Steph Curry argument's always going to be there, unless he were able to win a Finals MVP. I think, given the opportunity, given the chance to make one, I think he'll be up in the top 2, top 3 to win it. But I think KD is interesting because he's such a pure, ever since he's been in the league, just such a pure talent. Like, it's so enjoyable to watch. You know, he's just an absolute dominating scorer, and I think his defensive side kind of gets lessened to an extent. But, you know, I don't know. I think as we're talking, it's kind of like similar to the LeBron MJ argument. I mean, are we talking about career accolades? Because I think Kawhi maybe at the end of his career would have him on that. But if we're talking about pure talent, it's tough for me to say Kawhi is better than KD. You know, I think there's no doubt that KD is just such an unbelievable scorer from all levels, unstoppable, that it's like you gotta appreciate it, you know. And
Definitely.
even if he went to the Warriors, even if he got 2 titles that may have an asterisk, don't have an asterisk, but are definitely lessened by NBA media, I think still it's interesting to see what will happen with the last kind of third, maybe half of his career. What he's able to do once he's kind of the guy, 100% the guy again. I'm not saying he wasn't the guy in Golden State, but, you know, they just had so many guys that there really wasn't a guy. You know, they could have anyone. And so it's going to be interesting for KD's career and all-time career arc to see what he does with the Nets, how they're able to handle that. And I think the Nets are going to be an interesting team to pay attention to in the future.
And so I always think career points are fascinating, right? They show who stayed healthy. Do you want to guess how many career points Kevin Durant has?
Yeah. You said how many seasons? 12?
He's played 12, and he only played 27 games in 2015, but that's the only season he missed a significant amount of time.
I'm going with it's got to be around 20,000, right?
It's 22,940.
Jeez.
Okay. So within 2 games, he'll be at 23,000 points by the time or at least 3, right? Given his career scoring average. Do you want to guess how many Kawhi has?
That's lower. That's got to be under 15 probably, right? 10?
Under 10.
Yeah, I think that matters.
He has scored 9,620 points for his career. He's not even he's close to 10,000, but he's not going to get to 10,000 till next year. I put up a query in the group chat. I don't know if you saw it. I think he's going to be the best player ever with the fewest amount of points, and he's only made 3 All-NBA teams.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to that, and whether it's the defensive aspect in his first career or the first part of his career or the load management, you know, and that's kind of what we have to take into account, you know, judging NBA players, because Kawhi wasn't asked to score, you know, in the beginning 4 or 5 years of his career. He wasn't asked to do all that. And so I think that's important to take into account, that he filled his role in the other ways. And now that he's blossomed into this player, you know, I think he's probably going to end with over 15,000 points, just barely. I doubt he makes it to 20, but still, when you think of all-time players and points, you're going to be like, Kawhi Leonard only had 15,000 points in the NBA. I mean, how? I mean, I guess he's had a shorter career than what seems like in my mind, because I feel like he's just been so good for a while. But still, I mean, that's I hate to say it's going to be a knock on his all-time ranking, but I think it's got to be.
So I just he's averaging 26.9 points a game this season, right? So I just round that up to 27. If he played 60 games every year for the next 5 seasons, you know how many points he'd have?
How many?
8,100. So that would put him right at. Hold on, sorry. That would put him at 17,000, okay? Now, I think we can probably agree that he's probably not going to get to 60 games or 27 points a game for the next 5 years, right? Mm-hmm. So that's at the high end, right? If he does that, that's his only shot. And I think, as the Clippers continue to add more pieces and as the pace... So one of my theories about this season is that the pace is really high, mm-hmm. right? So that's why you see Trae Young in a normal season, he would still be having a great season. But Trae Young this year is averaging like 30. He's averaging 29.6 and 9.3 assists. Normal season, he's probably averaging 24 and 7, right? Still a great year. But, you know, like, and you go look at Luka Doncic. This year, he's averaging 28.7, 8.7 assists, 9.3 rebounds. Normal season, he's probably averaging 25, 6 and 7, right? Like, I think the stats this year are really inflated. Like, right? Like, even look at LeBron's stats. LeBron's averaging 26 points, 11 assists. Normal year, he's probably averaging same amount of points because it's LeBron, but still, like, probably 8 assists, you know? Although I do think he might average that amount because this is the best, like, lob threat he's played with. I mean, Anthony Davis, good God. You know, like, I'm not a fan of Anthony Davis myself, but him with LeBron, I mean, that's undeniable. You know, like, that's like two top 7 players right there. And so I just think, you know, like, the stats from back then kind of tell a more, like, telling picture, right? Like, LeBron in 2013 averaged 27 points, like, just a little below, 8 rebounds, and 7.3 assists. Like, he was a rebounding machine when he was in Miami. And so I guess this is my way of leading into this question. Was the 2013 version of LeBron, do you think that's the best? I already said what I thought, but what do you think? Do you think that was the best version of LeBron?
Yeah, I think it's gonna be. I think at least for right now, it's definitely. And this sounds weird coming from a 18-year veteran, but I'm not sure we haven't seen the best truly of LeBron James yet. And the reason I say that is because what do we say when he starts averaging, when he takes more and more effort off of scoring offensively and just looks to distribute? And what if he puts up a 20 and 15 season? You know, like, how are you going to say that that's not the best LeBron? And so it just depends on how he ages. I think so far in his career, the athleticism, especially defensively in the 2013 year, I think there's no doubt he's one of the top, probably the best, if not the best defenders in the league that year, guard any position. And that, I think that's probably what separates it in my mind. I think the defensive aspect, because you hear all the time, you know, especially now, positionless basketball, you try to guard everyone. But I'm not sure that there was a more capable NBA player of guarding every position on the floor than 2013 LeBron James, because I think he could no doubt keep up with the quickness of the guards defensively, match up against, you know, forwards, no doubt. And I think he could even, you know, give some battles to some centers, some maybe undersized, you know, not a Tim Duncan, you know, not a Shaq, of course, but I think he, more than anyone else from that small forward, power forward position, he was able to match up with on the defensive side. And then you got to take the offensive side into account, which is, if not up there, the top 3 performances of his career.
And so, like, this is kind of my way of looking at it, right? Like, do you think a basketball player is better because of his athleticism or because of how good he is skill-wise, right? Like, that to me is, like, the ultimate question of how you value LeBron, right? Like, I think probably 2016 LeBron was the best version of him, you know, when he was the 3-1 comeback. But this game, like, what you said about the defense is so key, and we talked about it earlier, but, like, he shut down Tony Parker. Like, Tony Parker is one of the quickest players in NBA history, even when he was in year 13, right? Like, he was still one of the quickest players in the league. He could get to his spots. You couldn't really stop him, right? Like, Tony Parker was unstoppable. You brought up the shot in game 1 where he somehow got out of a crazy double team and hit that crazy bank shot. You know, like, he was really slippery. He was really crafty. And he went over 4 in overtime because of LeBron. Because LeBron stuck with him. And LeBron's, like, most people that are 6'8" cannot stick with point guards. Like, that's just a fact. Like, nowadays, most point guards can't stick with point guards. But the fact that LeBron did it capably and just, like, didn't let him get good looks, that's points in his favor. You know, you could always point to the 2011 Eastern Conference Finals. I don't like to bring that up, but I mean, you can't deny that he shut down Derrick Rose. That's just, you're blind at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't even think, like, the most biased person in the world towards Derrick Rose can't look at 2011 and be like, you know, Derrick did a good job in that series.
Yeah.
Like, you just can't do it if you're honest with yourself. And so I don't know where I lean, but I do think it's an interesting conversation, right? Because LeBron's probably peaked like 3 or 4 times.
Yeah.
You know, like if you think about it.
As different players each time, you know.
Right. Like 2009-10 was probably like one peak, right? Where he was like at his most athletic.
Yeah.
You know, 2012-13, he was just a monster, right? Like he was bigger in Miami than he was in any of those other spots. Like that's just like a fact. You look at him, he's like physically bigger and stronger in Miami, and he's like he's not as explosive as he was in Cleveland because, you know, the weight kind of brings you down, but he was close to it, and he was like the best defensive player, one of the 5 best defensive players we've ever seen. And then in 2016, he kind of fell off like defensive wise, but then he just became like the ultimate chess master on offense, right? Like he knew how to move the pieces, like he knew how to manipulate the defense, and he learned how to shoot better, right? Like he didn't really know how to shoot till he was in Cleveland the second time, which, you know, props to him for averaging 27 points a game without being able to make a 3-pointer.
Like, it's interesting too, because not only has he peaked 3 times, I kind of mentioned before, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw another peak LeBron, you know, maybe against his all-time stats, you know, it's not as peaked as high as it would, but I mean, just what if he starts playing kind of like a Rajon Rondo, you know, tries to take up the point guard position and just dishes, and then we're going to be having the conversation like, okay, I think the conversation's already there, but like, is he the best passer of all time, not only from the small forward position, but he's got to be up there in the top 5, top 3 best passers of all time, you know? And he's going to probably finish with 10,000 assists if he doesn't have that already, I don't think. He's got 10,000 rebounds, I believe, and he's going to be close to 40,000 points. And so that's always going to be the kind of foundation for the LeBron argument, especially when you're comparing him to Michael Jordan. But, you know, another game that I want to mention from LeBron that's obviously been big in his career arc is the I think it was 2013 Eastern Conference Finals, or 2012 against Game 6. And that, you know, everyone talks about the stats, you know, 45, 15, and 5, but I don't know. At least watching live, I don't know if I've ever seen a more dominant, because the game was over. Like, the game was over right when it started. Like, truly, because LeBron, I think he started like 8 for 9 or something. He couldn't miss, or 10 for 11. He couldn't miss, and the game was over by the fourth quarter. And, you know, that's something that I think we need to talk about when we're talking about the clutch factor, because I almost would say that is more clutch than maybe his block in the finals. Now that's tough because that's one of the greatest NBA finals plays of all times, but it was such a essential game for the Celtics. Like, you knew that they had to finish, you know, if they probably wanted to finish off the Heat, you knew that they were going to have to do it there, and LeBron never, ever gave them the chance. Like, didn't give him a chance once. He was out by the fourth quarter with 45, 15, and 5, and he rested the rest of the game. And so that is what I want to see. Wish I could have saw more of from LeBron. And I know that is tough to do every game. You can't put up those stats, but that aggressiveness, like, he went into that game kind of like in the fourth quarter of the one that we were talking about, 2013 Game 6 in the finals. He went into that game putting it all on him and saying, all right, you know, I'm getting us out of here. You know, we're going to Miami. And I think that it's obviously talked about as one of the best games in LeBron's career, if not the best. But I think that dog aspect kind of showed out in that game, and we really haven't seen that as much ever since.
And I do think it's fair to say that the 2012 Celtics were not as good as the 2013 Spurs. I think we could probably both agree with that.
Yes.
But I do think that, like, that look LeBron had in his eye, right? Like, we haven't seen that much. Because, I mean, LeBron's not really usually in that position. But I think you could argue the clutchest games of his careers have been Game 6s, you know, this one, Game 6, 2012, Game 6 in the 2016 finals. You know, like, in, like, the last 5 years, he's put up, right? Like, it's either put up or shut up, and he's put up consistently. You can't complain about what he's done. Like, if you do, you're not paying attention, clearly. I think it's interesting, right? Like, I don't think he could have put his shoulder down like he did in that game for this one. I just don't think it was possible. Like, Duncan was way better than any of those Celtics guys were at that point, you know, like, just thinking about it, right? Like, I'm looking at I didn't realize that was a 20-point game, but obviously you had LeBron with the 45, 15, and 5, and then the leading scorer for the Celtics was Rondo. You know, like, if Rondo was your leading scorer, you knew you were in trouble, right? Like, Ray Allen shot 3 for 7, Garnett shot 6 for 14, and Paul Pierce shot 4 for 18.
Truth.
Like, I don't think the teams really compared, personally. Like, and I just want to make a quick plea. Someone put this game on YouTube. Like, I don't want to just watch the highlights. I want to watch the soul get sucked out of that Celtics team.
Yeah. Like, demoralized from the TD Garden and everyone in there just. You could find just about any NBA game on YouTube, right? Like, if you look hard enough. But you can't find this one. You can't find this one. I don't know how. Paul Pierce burned it from the Internet Archives right as he was writing his top 5 without LeBron. And so I think we've just touched on about everything. I do want to say that Heat team, those role players between Battier, Miller, and Ray Allen, that might be like the best collection of like role players, one of the best collections of role players that we'll see. You know, Battier really brought it in this game. He didn't really bring it in the fourth quarter. I thought he probably should have played. If I was the Heat, I would have just gone crazy and put out. This is the lineup I would have put out, okay, just because of the floor spacing. I would have just had LeBron be the point guard. I would have done Ray Allen, Mike Miller, Shane Battier, Chris Bosh. Like, think about shooting in that lineup. Yeah, like, I mean, absolutely. And I think what you touched on doesn't kind of get mentioned enough. I think Mike Miller, Shane Battier, they were the glue of those Miami Heat teams, and it's just like, I mean, they were so consistent. I mean, really, you know, and it's almost like, you know, James Jones, even he kind of filled in there every once in a while. They had, you know, those guys that are perfect for LeBron, you know, a Danny Green kind of esque player, you know, maybe not as good defensively as Danny Green, but they fit so well, and something that doesn't as often happen in LeBron's career so far, they hit the shots, you know, and that, you know, we could talk about the Cavs teams that struggled to hit the shots off of LeBron, and that's really what separated Miami. And I think the Lakers this year, I think they're hitting the shots, you know, and the ball's always been there, open off LeBron, especially when he drives. The thing is, can you knock it down? And at least Battier and Miller were able to. And, you know, in the future with the Lakers, I think that's kind of the direction that they should head. Try to find some more. Yeah, that's definitely a good point. So I think another point I want to make, this isn't really a point, I just want to laugh at it. Tracy McGrady and Rashard Lewis were on the bench for the Spurs and the Heat, respectively. And I just wanted to laugh at that because, you know, some other good names from this game that didn't play. Corey Joseph, you know, he of the big contract from the Kings and former Pacers backup point guard. Juwan Howard. Was it Juwan Howard on the team? Fab Five? I don't think Juwan Howard was – I don't think he was officially listed in the box score, unfortunately. Okay. So you mentioned James Jones, Udonis Haslem, obviously, and my two favorite Heat players of all time, Norris Cole and Joel Anthony, you know, real legends. Well, don't hate on Norris Cole, okay? I'm not hating on Norris Cole, but... Yeah, Anthony, we can talk about that. But I think Cole... had a similar art to. He's like a combination of Chalmers and Mike Miller and Battier. You know, he could hit it sometimes, but sometimes he couldn't. And I don't know. Norris Cole, I thought could develop into be something if the Heat wanted to continue, but it just turned out, you know, not much. And I think an interesting player to talk about is Chalmers, because he was other than the big three in the Heat, I think that's the guy that you kind of go to talk about who else was kind of there beyond Haslam. And I think Chalmers, though he doesn't get talked about often, I mean, he played his role. Now, all the time it wasn't phenomenal, whether it was making turnovers, and he was definitely often shit on by LeBron and Chris Bosh and Dwayne Wade. But I think he became what he needed to do for the team, and they obviously didn't win all the finals, but you know, I think Chalmers got to be happy with his tenure with the Heat, at least. You know,
if you ever want to laugh, just look at Chalmers' 3-point percentage immediately before LeBron got there, and then immediately after. Okay. So we're just going to go through it like this, right? His rookie season, right? He shot actually pretty good from three. He shot 36.7% from three his rookie year. He started all 82 games.
Well, he had that shot in the NBA or in the NCAA championship in his mind. You know, he had that going.
And then the next year, he shot 32% from three. The year LeBron got there, shot 36, and then 39, 41. 38.5. You want to guess what he shot the year after LeBron left?
What?
He shot 29.4%.
Oh, he got too used to those beautiful passes. Then he realized he had to do it himself.
His 3-point percentage for the rest of his career, because he only played 2 seasons after that. He shot, I'm not going to count the Miami because he shot 0.91% from three, but that was in like 6 games. He must have been hurt. And then he shot 33% in Memphis, and then shot 27.7% in Memphis. So his 3-point percentage, as soon as LeBron left, just went off a cliff.
And you see that with almost everyone. And that's another thing about LeBron that doesn't get talked about. He makes the players on his team better. Like he does, whether it's on the court or development. I don't know what it is. The guys out that now, I'm not going to say that they don't have to adjust, because obviously like the Kevin Loves, the Kyrie's in a sense, and, you know, Dwayne Wade and Chris Bosh, but I think he makes the team as a whole better just due to his playmaking ability. And not only do you see that in Chalmers whenever he left LeBron, but you definitely see that in Cleveland after he left a couple years ago. Like, they went from NBA Finals to the worst team, if not bottom 2 in the league. And that you can't just glide over. You really can't. I mean, they lost some other pieces, but you still had Kevin Love. You know, that impact is unbelievable that he could do. And, you know, maybe if he stayed healthy, I think he could have led the Lakers to a playoff berth, if not maybe one win last year. Now that didn't happen, and I think there's a lot in the future that it's going to be interesting, because right now it's interesting because LeBron is already talked about. You know, I think the consensus is obviously MJ's the GOAT. But he's already being talked about being the GOAT. What if he's able to, you know, just continue to play like this, win a couple more ships for a couple of years, and go out on top? Like, what if he's able to go out on top, 20 years, 5 championships? That's going to be a hard resume, and that's the thing. That's what LeBron. I mentioned this earlier. He's going to have the resume, but in the end, it's just going to come down to, you know, preference. And, you know, he's going to have the best, if not one of the best resumes of all time. Now, Bill, you got a couple people with, you know, 10 championships, 9 championships, and that's going to, but he's going to probably be the all-time leading scorer. and he's going to be only player probably with 30,000 points, 10,000 assists, and 10,000 rebounds, which is incredible. What if he adds a couple more titles, goes out on top, And I'm tired of the MJ versus LeBron argument because they're different players, but and in different times, truly, Kobe's more comparable to MJ than LeBron is, and maybe even Kawhi is more comparable to MJ than LeBron. But maybe we should start doing our GOAT trees by classifications of players.
Not a bad idea.
We do a center GOAT. We'll do a center / power forwards GOAT, and then you do a scorers GOAT, kind of, and then you just do a playmaker. And that's the thing. It really is a team. It's a team game.
Mm-hmm.
And LeBron's just able to make his team better, and that's something I think more than almost anyone else that we've ever seen before.
And another guy that was in this game that made his teammates clearly better. Tim Duncan. Mm-hmm. Tim Duncan, I think we both agree, underrated. Actually, I want to make one more point before we have a final discussion.
Okay.
Do you agree? Was this a perfect basketball game?
It's gotta be close. I think the drama, the context is absolutely there. It's got to be one of the closest things that we've gotten. Now, a couple others stand out in my mind. Obviously, Game 7 of the NBA, the 2016 Finals. That's a pretty up there. But just for the context and then the delivery of the game and how it kind of encapsulated the whole series, I'd probably say it's probably one of the most perfect games in NBA history, because I think it does kind of encapsulate the series as a whole in one game,
And then I agree. I think other perfect basketball games include Game 6 of the 98 Finals, where Jordan just put on a clinic. There's some other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head, but this one's pretty close. You have two high teams competing at the highest of levels, right? Two of the best players of all time. Two of probably the 7 or 8 best players of all time just competing for the top spot. And I think that segues into, do you think that Tim Duncan and LeBron are rivals?
It's a great question. It really is, because if we're looking just purely at let's say we're looking at basketballreference.com and that's it. We're just looking at the stats. That's all we're looking at. I think there's an argument to be made that these guys had their battles, but and probably more than anyone else in LeBron's career, other than maybe the Steph Curry thing. That's kind of weird, because the whole time it's you kind of gave the Warriors the advantage in every single one, and so that's why you don't see as much of as a battle between the players. And I think that's why it's interesting to look at Tim Duncan possibly as just singularly his biggest rival. Though I think another factor that you have to take into account is the the media, the communication, and how it all plays out. And when you look at it that way, it's Tim Duncan didn't have a rival. Tim Duncan just wanted to play basketball and get dubs. And so, I think there's an argument to be made for Tim Duncan to be his biggest rival maybe ever. But, I think if you ask Tim Duncan, he'd be like, I'm just trying to hoop, bro,
Right. That's probably, the right way to look at it. I just feel for me, I think if you were going to give LeBron a rival for his career, right? If Michael had rivals, it was Isaiah Thomas, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, right? And in that sense, if you want to go off that tradition, it's kind of the same way, right? I think Tim Duncan was the best player of the 2000s. I know a lot of, if you talk to NBA players, they disagree with me. Mm-hmm. But, that team was just so dominant, right? He was the best player on 4 championship teams in that decade, right? That's not a fluke. Or I guess 3 technically, but he won the championship in 99. But I looked at the head-to-head, right, in the playoffs. So Tim Duncan is 11-5 against LeBron, right? Obviously, you have that series sweep against the Cavs. So even if you want to take that out, would be 7-5 against LeBron in the playoffs, right? Like 3 series. And obviously, the Spurs were better in 2007. I don't think anyone would dispute that. But to me, like, they were pretty much a dead heat in 2013 and 14, like the teams wise. And the fact that Tim Duncan led that Spurs team to 7 games in 2013 and then to a pretty good beating in 2014, I just think, to me, like, I think they were about as evenly matched as you can have for 2 players who didn't play the same position, but just, it was like, in terms of how dominant they were, Duncan averaged, I mean, the year that they went to this finals in 2013, he was averaging like 18 points a game almost. Like, he was just at the top of his game throughout his whole career. And to me, like, I feel like they were 2 guys, right, like, that they were just so close in quality that you couldn't really call it one way or the other. Like, you couldn't say coming into the 2013 finals, oh yeah, the Heat are going to whip them.
Yeah.
Or you couldn't say the other way either. Oh, the Spurs are going to destroy them. Now, 2014, it was different, right? 2014, the Spurs were on a mission. And I mean, they just rolled through that playoffs, with the exception of the Mavericks, which somebody's got to write an article about that Mavericks team, because somehow they're the only team that challenged the 2014 Spurs. But it was like those 2 guys, to me, right? Like, I think it's damning. I think you agree with me on this. I mean, if anyone would agree with me on this, it's you. I think it's damning for Steph Curry and KD that they had to team up to beat LeBron. Like, just flat out. Like, when the teams were evenly matched, right? Like, when the Warriors weren't as healthy, right? Like, Steph was hurt, but the Cavs were more hurt in 2015. And when it was evenly matched, right, the Cavs came out on top. And so then they go at Kevin Durant, obviously. Nothing's evenly matched. The only team that gave those Warriors any trouble were the Rockets. And that was one time. And so I just think, to me, like, those 2, Duncan and LeBron, they were not only, like, great competitors, it was great entertainment. To me, I just think if I was going to give LeBron one, it would have to be Duncan. But I could see if you go with Steph or KD. I'm not, like, mad at that. I'm just in my own head.
Yeah, I agree. I think another thing that's interesting about the rivalry argument is they didn't necessarily face off against one each other like on the court, and I think that's another thing people take into account. You don't see Tim Duncan guarding LeBron James, and you don't see. I mean, maybe on a switch off, but it's not like they were constantly battling, face to face, going at each other per se. Now, I know their teams did, and I think that's valid grounds for the argument. But just playing devil's advocate, I think it's tough to say that to an extent, because they weren't, first off, vocal in each other's, I don't know, rivalry. You don't have to hate each other to be a rivalry, but that seems to be at least an attribute, at least talking about the rivalry, like acknowledging that it was there. And I think that's kind of where that falls to an extent. But I think another interesting thing to look at when you're talking about those Spurs teams in the 2000s is the first time that the Spurs as a franchise ever trailed in the NBA Finals was Game 7 of the 2013 Finals. They had won 5 straight Game 1s. They had never lost a Game 1 in the Finals, and they had literally never trailed in the NBA Finals until they lost it in Game 7. And that just speaks on the quality of the Spurs, the quality of the coaching throughout the whole 2000s, late 90s, early, that 15, 20 years of greatness. And I think that's just really, really incredible to look at, the fact that they had 4 titles up to that point and never trailed in a series. And that just speaks further to how good the Spurs really, really were.
Yeah, that's like a really good point. Like, we obviously spent a lot of time, just giving Pop the business for not having Duncan out there. But I mean, to be as consistent as they were, right? To win 50 games a year as many times as they had in a row, Like, that's unheard of. You know, you have to really hand it to them, and you have to hand it to Duncan, right? Like, that consistency starts with him. They never won. Obviously, I don't think they won fewer than 50 games any year except the first lockout year. And even that year they finished, let's see. That year they finished, I think, 37-13, which is clearly like a 60-win pace. And so...
And something about the Spurs that I think, like I've said, separates them is the management, and not only just, you know, hit and miss. It's like they don't necessarily miss. You know, they're just consistent, build upon. Now, of course, they're currently in a down stretch to an extent where they're still, you know, a validly decent, not good team, but you know, they got all. I think they kind of went off when they got Aldridge a bit. I think that's kind of one of their misses per se, if you could call Marcus Aldridge a miss. You know, that's as crazy as that sounds. But you got to give it to the management. And you got to think, over the last 20 years since we've been alive, has there been a better managed team? Not only, I mean, maybe the Patriots but easily in the NBA, I think they got to be the best over the course of our lifetimes, the best managed team in the league.
I would probably go with sports. I think they did it longer than the Patriots. I think the Patriots, we'll see how they do without Brady this year. I think that'll be interesting to watch. But do you have anything else?
No, I other than the fact that the Spurs kind of get underestimated, like truly. And I think we really got to start throwing them up there. And you know, we don't really talk about teams. We talk about individual teams a lot. You know, individual seasons. But like, if we're talking just consistently in the NBA, the Spurs got to be one of the best, if not the best franchise of all time. Just talk about per capita. But like, I mean, obviously the championships fall into the lines of the Lakers and the Celtics, who battled, especially in the early years when there weren't as many teams. But since the Spurs have been around, it's like they've always been there. And you know, I think when we think about the great teams of like the 2000s, you think about Kobe and Shaq Lakers, you think about the Suns, and obviously, or the 2000s and 2013s, you think about the Warriors, you got to think about the Spurs and the Heat. But the thing about the Spurs is like they've maintained that the whole time, and they just they don't necessarily rebuild often, and that's pretty great. And you know, for matching up against what at the time we thought was probably one of the best teams of all time, they did a phenomenal job. You know, whenever LeBron and Chris and Dwayne all teamed up to go to Miami, we're like, it's kind of like the Warriors. Like, how do you stop them? Only they did, you know. And in the past NBA, or in the last couple of years when the Warriors were stacked, we were always like, it was certain it was the Warriors, and we saw it. It was, but they were pretty certain that, you know, the Heat were going to win a couple, and every single year the Spurs just, I mean, the last 2 years, of course, but the Spurs just provided the insane matchup, you know, just tough. And I think the Mavericks, you know, that's obviously a fall on LeBron's career, the Mavericks series, but I don't want to say you could give it away to him for it being the first season. But, you know, if they would have lost in the 2013 finals, the 2011, you can't give that to, you don't give it to them. You know, you're like, okay, that's the Spurs. And I think that's what's really impressive. They kind of dethroned one of the greatest teams of all time, or, you know, what we thought of at the time to be like, could be the greatest team of all time. And now we just don't talk about the Heat like that anymore. And that's because of the Spurs, you know?
Yeah, they put a real abrupt end to the dynasty. To the Heat dynasty. I feel like the Spurs are definitely like, because it's weird, right? Like, you don't think of a dynasty as like teams that don't win back to back, but the Spurs won basically 5 and 15 years, right? That's like one every 3 years.
Yeah.
That might be more impressive.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, we talk about, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to diminish MJ's dynasty or, the Lakers 3 straight. But at some point, we got to be asking as media, as journalists, where do we rank those Spurs, like the 15-year Spur tenure, or the 20 years where they just maybe didn't win it every single year, but they were in it every year, and every other year they almost won it. And so we got to be where do you fit those teams in? Like, because we really haven't seen, other than, and in the early NBA, it's so much easier to do this with the way it was set up, how little teams there were, and kind of where the talent was. But since the distribution, since the merger, other than, the Showtime Lakers, maybe, is there a better tenured team than the Spurs,
I don't think there was. You can't say, right? Like, the team was just loaded. I mean, they did, like you said earlier with the front office point. I mean, finding Tony Parker and Manu. I mean, Tony Parker was a late first round pick, pretty close to second round, and then Manu was like the second to last pick in the draft. So to add those guys that late, and it's crazy. I don't think the Spurs, the fewest amount of games they won in a whole season was they went 50-32 in 2009-10. And it was just an incredible run.
Off year. An off year, right? My God.
Off year. Tim Duncan's last year, they won 67 games.
Yeah. And you got to wonder, like, is it something that's in the water in San Antonio, or like truly? I mean, at some point you got to question: are these guys just hitting the draft, or do they have an idea, unlike anyone else, on how to develop these players? And you got to start giving it to the development of them, because they just continue to string out decent. And even you mentioned Patty Mills earlier, like. That's a decent player. Like, he's perfect for the Spurs organization. And it seems like they find those guys often and are able to maximize them to their fullest potential.
Yeah, definitely. I think on that note, Will, I think we're going to wrap it up. Will, thank you so much. You did a phenomenal job.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on anytime. Not just LeBron, although, how to get about LeBron. Have me on anytime, maybe. I love it. Thank you.
Of course. Yes. And make sure you go listen to our other podcasts. We have Linsanity, also with Will Hogsett and our friend Dylan Hughes. They're both on that one, and they did great. I posted the Dylan Hughes rant on Twitter, if you want to go check that out, if you want a little taste. Yeah, and then go check out the Circle City chat room with Zach Griffith and Brett Sexton. They did a great job breaking down the Snyder Cut and a bunch of other nerd-related stuff that really has nothing to do with sports, except somehow Zach Griffith gets in a shot at the Knicks. And so I just want to say thank you for listening.